Welcome all, Dax here. With all these rumors constantly swirling around about Nintendo's next console, I thought it was my turn to take a crack at a predictions video. I don't have any inside knowledge, of course, but just looking at Nintendo's history and looking at a lot of these rumors swirling around, I thought we have at least enough information to maybe get somewhat of an accurate idea of what this could or could not be. So I'm just going to be going through some of the elements of what this next console could look like, just going through a variety of different topics like the looks, the name, features, specs, things like that. So let's engage with a fun little conversation here. So I think it's important to start with Nintendo's philosophy. So a lot of times Nintendo likes to push the envelope and be innovative, but at the same time I think they may also be a little more conservative with this particular console compared to previous ones, just due to the fact that they may still have some PTSD from the transition from the Wii to the Wii U. Feel free to check out the video I made about why the Wii U is maybe better than the Switch, but some of the things going against the Wii U is I think it was difficult for consumers to understand what the Wii U was. From looking at the two pieces of hardware side by side, they look pretty similar, with the only real distinction being the gamepad. So there's that, and the name alone just makes you think it's peripheral, and so I think a lot of people just didn't even know what the Wii U was. I think trying to be the successor of the Wii really ended up hurting it in the long run. There's other factors involved, of course, too, like third-party support, but with 13 million consoles, I think there's a very good chance people thought this was just a Wii accessory. And so what I'm getting to is I think with this next Switch, I think conceptually it's going to be very similar to a Switch, if not identical, but I think they're going to change up a lot of other aspects. Like visually, I think it's going to look quite different. I don't know how different it's going to look. Like, I don't know how they're going to mix up the design. I think it's still going to be a tablet design with some Joy-Cons or some controllers attached to the side. Maybe changing the size of the buttons, adding a couple extra buttons in, obviously a couple little features with gimmicks and things like that, but I think the main focus they're going to have is let's make something that looks different when you immediately see it, which kind of takes us to the name. I think the name is probably going to be different than Switch. I mean, they could call it the Switch 2. I wouldn't put it past them, considering they have the new 3DS. If they are going to use the Switch name, the only cool name I could think of is a Super Switch. The more I hear that, Super Switch, I'm like, that sounds pretty cool. I would totally buy a Super Switch, and that's what they did with the Super NES. So it doesn't sound like the craziest idea, but I still do think that it's the most likely scenario that they're going to have a whole new name, probably something short and concise. Maybe they'll call it the Nintendo Dream, or the Nintendo Go, or the Nintendo P. Okay, maybe I should just stop there, but you get the point. Feature-wise, this is hard to predict, because again, I don't know how much they may deviate. I have a feeling they're going to stay pretty close to the Switch, and I don't think they're going to go too crazy with any out there designs and innovations. The only thing I can maybe think of is a foldable screen, but with the price point and the fact that it has to hook up to a TV still, I don't think that's the most likely scenario. One thing I do think is very likely is backwards compatibility. I mean, unless the form factor is completely different, but again, I still think they're going to use a very similar form factor. I wouldn't be surprised if they still use cartridges, but the new cartridges may be bigger to hold more games. That wouldn't surprise me at all. One reason why I'm thinking it's going to be backwards compatible is that's usually what Nintendo does with their consoles. Like, a lot of people are worried that it won't be, but if you look at the history, of course the Switch wasn't backwards compatible with the Wii U due to the different form factor, but it's technically the first hybrid console Nintendo's made. The Wii U was compatible with the Wii with Wii games. Wii was compatible with GameCube. Before that, nothing was backwards compatible, but on the handheld side, the 3DS could play DS games, the DS could play GBA, and the GBA could play Game Boy games. So I think there's a very good chance that this next console is going to be backwards compatible. I also think it's going to be a hybrid. I don't see them straying away from that formula. It's worked tremendously well for them, so I think they're going to continue that up. Spec-wise, I'm not going to pretend to be super well versed in some of the specifics of the technology side of things, but I do have a basic elementary understanding of some of these things. I do think Nintendo is going to continue to work with NVIDIA to try to get a chip that's well optimized. I would imagine they're probably going to do a bigger screen. They most likely will go back to an LCD to try to cut down on cost. I've heard people talking about this console being comparable to a Series S and PS5, and I think that's ludicrous. I don't think there's any way that happens. Now, I think the Switch is definitely going to, or I should say the Switch 2 or whatever it's called, is definitely going to look better than the current Switch model, but there's no way it's going to be that good of looking. I think most likely the power is going to be somewhere between like a PS4 and a Series S, so more powerful than a PS4, Xbox One, but not quite as powerful as a Series S. Now, I think what's really going to help this out is the support of DLSS. There's been a lot of rumors that this has been shown in action with ray tracing enabled, and I don't think this is going to be used consistently, but I think the DLSS will be great for trying to output a 4K image, maybe even a 4K 60. Now, this console is not going to be a native 4K gaming device, but I could definitely see in docked mode the game being able to put out a 4K image, at least an upscaled one. So again, I think this console is probably going to have a lot of similarities to something like a Series S in power, maybe just a tad bit below her. Because compared to the previous gen consoles, those consoles had decent GPUs, but the CPUs were sorely lacking. And so I think this console is definitely going to find its niche as far as finding that sweet spot between power, performance, and price. Now, I do think it's going to have some extra RAM to kind of go with that, so maybe somewhere between 8 to 12 gigs. If I had to guess, I'm thinking probably a 1080p handheld experience, since the screen's going to be bigger, with a lot of games being able to be upscaled to 4K when docked. Now, all this is probably going to come at a price. Now, what price would this Switch successor be? I think the most likely answer is $400. With things like inflation, other companies increasing the price of their consoles, and Nintendo liking to sell their consoles at a profit, I highly doubt they're going to stick to that $300 price tag, especially if they really want to emphasize this being a Super Switch, like being better than the original in every single way. They're really going to want to show out with this one. And that $400 price tag is a good sweet spot as far as still being below most of the contemporaries around there, but being impressive in its own kind of way. I mean, it could be as low as $350 replacing the OLED model, but I think $400, a nice $399 price tag is the most likely, especially when you have things like inflation being cited for everything going up in price, even things they don't have to be. So yeah, I think $400 could be higher, could be lower, but I would say there's like a very good chance that's my final answer there. Like the Switch, I think they're going to put a ton of effort into this launch lineup. I think an almost guarantee is a new 3D Mario game. Now, what they do with that Mario game, no idea, wrong video, but I'm pretty sure they're going to have a 3D Mario game. I think there's a pretty good chance they're going to have a new Mario Kart. It's hard to say because Mario Kart 8 never dies, but it's been like 10 years since the last new game in the franchise, so I think there's a good chance there could be a new Mario Kart, even if it's not released alongside with the console, at least it's announced around the same time. Metroid Prime 4 is another contender. It's hard to say if that game's done yet, but I definitely think that will be either launch or launch window. There's also a good chance we could see some ports, some updated versions of previous titles like, say, Tears of the Kingdom. It's possible they could go the Xbox and PlayStation route of just offering performance upgrades for existing games, but knowing Nintendo, I think it's more likely they'll re-release the game with extra features and visual improvements. This console will probably be able to play your old Switch games, as I mentioned, with it being backwards compatible, but I don't think you're going to be getting any extra benefits unless you're willing to fork up the cash for an updated version of it. That's just my guess, could be wrong. I do think they will put some extra emphasis on third-party ports to show off and kind of advertise the power of the Switch 2 Super Switch thing. So I think some examples could be like, maybe they'll have Cyberpunk 2077 running on there. Of course, these could be compromised versions to some extent, but something to kind of show off the fact that, hey, this can play the big boy games. So some other games could be like Red Dead 2, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Assassin's Creed Mirage, just games like that, or maybe even the newest Call of Duty. So to recap, I think this new Switch is going to be similar to the old one in concept, but I think the performance is going to be the focus here, as well as wanting to mix up the way it looks to really advertise that this is a new product. The name could go either way, same thing, but But overall, I am interested and excited to see what this actual product looks like, because it's been a long time since the original Switch, and chips have gone a lot cheaper since then, so either way I think we're getting a good performance upgrade. Now as far as a timeline, I'm guessing they'll probably announce it summer of 24 and release it that same fall. Maybe my second choice would be announcing it the spring of 24 and releasing summer. Either way, I don't see them having longer than a 4-month marketing window. I think they'll want to minimize the downtime of sales for the Switch and the successor. But what are your thoughts? How powerful do you think Nintendo's next console will be? How much do you think it's going to cost? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. As always, I appreciate you for watching, and until next time, see ya!